audience member number 1, audience member number 2, audience member number 3.
During the 1930s, the United States government enforced a deportation operation, which would become known as the Mexican repatriation, to conduct one of the largest mass deportations known to date. Its purpose was to improve the economy for what was considered to be a real American. It was done in response to the economic crisis that we experienced here during the 1930s, which would become known as the Great Depression. The year was 1929, and Mexicans here in America were being blamed for the downfall of the economy in the United States. But did you know that more than half of the people that were deported at that time were actually United States citizens? And while most think of immigration issues and mass deportations as being an issue that's specific to today's current administration, the reality is that these issues date back to prior than a century ago. With the Mexican repatriation being among one of the largest mass deportations to date, the actual number of Mexican Americans that were victims of the Mexican repatriation and the mass deportations is unknown. However, an article by Anna Minion in 2020 estimated that this number is somewhere between 350,000 all the way up to 1 million, with 60% of these people actually being United States citizens. Although Mexican Americans were blamed for the job shortages and the economic ruin of the United States during the Great Depression, there were actually multiple factors that caused the Great Depression, none of which were actually related to immigrants. One true significant factor that resulted in the Great Depression was the stock market crash of 1929. You see, prior to that, the Roaring Twenties was a time where the economy was good here in the United States. Unemployment rates were at an all-time low. Inflation was at an all-time low, resulting in a booming stock market. But then came the stock market crash of 1929. And that was then followed by a decade-long crisis here in the United States that was then called the Great Depression. There's an article published in the Herbert Hoover Presidential Library that can be found at hoover.archives.gov. And it states that it only took around a week or even less to see the drastic change in the stock market that happened with the crash. This in turn affected many things in the economy, which included jobs. American people used Mexican descendants as a scapegoat. They blamed them for stealing jobs as well as the economic crisis. Americans then figured if people of Mexican descent were no longer here, it would open up job opportunities for them, which would result in a better economy and ultimately result in a better life here in the United States for what was thought to be or considered to be a real American. Now, these ideas caused ongoing prejudice towards people of Mexican descent and ultimately ended up in wrongful deportations and countless United States citizens. While the Mexican repatriation happened nearly 100 years ago, the false negative biases that surrounded the need for mass deportation, we can still hear today. These absurd ideas paint pictures of America's downfall at the hands of job-stealing immigrants. This kind of negative bias only supports bigotry and systemic racism. An article by Skinner, Dorknew et al. In 2023 states the idea: when inequalities that have been normalized are presented with an opportunity for positive change, it can impact racism negatively. Now, this was a very brief history of the Mexican repatriation. and how the negative biases surrounding it are still affecting the United States nearly 1 century later. And although there have been other deportation operations, the Mexican repatriation remains to be one of the largest to date. Therefore, it should also serve as an important history lesson of how negative biases support systemic racism. It is common knowledge that history repeats itself. This makes learning our history of the utmost importance. Proper education can help eliminate negative bias and reduce systemic racism. Today, in 2025, we can turn on our TV, we can scroll on our cell phones, and the same negative biases surrounding immigration and our current economic issues can still be heard today. By taking these historical events of the Mexican repatriation into consideration, we can overcome systemic racism and strive for a better future for all humanity.